All right. On our previous lessons, we have seen the difficulties or the operation overhead and cost that we face when deploying our IT infrastructure the traditional way, which is the on-premise or the data center. And we have also seen how we can benefit from the cloud, leveraging the technologies of the cloud to deploy our applications in the cloud, such as cost, agility, high availability, scalability, and many more. All right, and we have seen different types of deployments. That is the public cloud, the private cloud, and the hybrid, where you leverage your workloads on the on-premise and certain workloads on the cloud. Okay. Now today, let's have a closer look at AWS global infrastructure. All right. So we say that AWS operates its services through data centers that are located across the globe, or these data centers that are interconnected globally. Now, how are these data centers organized? Are they simply scattered all over the world, or they do have the defined structure? Now, the answer is yes. AWS's global infrastructure is organized in region and availability zone model. All right, so we have region and we have availability zones. These are the way the AWS data centers are organized. Now, what are the building blocks of AWS global infrastructure? From the smallest unit, we have these data centers, where smallest unit per se, but we have seen how large and how huge AWS data centers are. So we have these data centers across the globe, and these data centers are organized in what's known as an availability zone. All right. And these availability zones are again organized in region. So we say that AWS operates from its data centers across the globe, and it is organized in region availability zone model. All right. So in this topic, we are going to focus on these three infrastructures, but we do have other infrastructures which is more specific use case that's known as the edge location or point of presence (POP). Sometimes we call it POP. And we have something that's known as the local zone as well. We are going to see this on a dedicated slide, but first let's focus on these three topics. All right. So if we want to look at AWS's global infrastructure, it would look something like this. Okay, so we have the world map here. This is AWS's website. I'm going to share the link with you in the chat. So as we can see, we have these greenish dots that we can see over here. So if we hover over it, we can see the region, what it is. All right, this is the North Virginia region, and this is the Canada Central region. This is the North Virginia region. Okay, and we have the Ireland and so on. Okay, so this is where AWS operates from. It has a huge footprint around the globe. Okay, and AWS continues to build its data centers across the globe, which the red ones, the red dots are the coming soon, which are under building phase. Okay, so this is how AWS global infrastructure would look like in a map. All right. So we have AWS region. Let's zoom in into one of these regions that we have seen. Let's zoom into North America, and in North America, let's zoom in to the US West 2 or the Oregon region. Okay, so that's how regions are spelled out. It's US West 2, US East 1, and so on. Or EU West 2 for London, and something like that. Okay, so this is the US West 2, the Oregon region. Okay, so we have a boundary, we have a well-defined region, which is the Oregon region in this example, which is this one. All right. So inside this region, that we have availability zones. Okay, so the things that we can see in yellow, these are our availability zones. In this example, we have three availability zones, and these availability zones are interconnected with a private link, high-speed, low-latency private link with one another. Okay, so an availability zone is a distinct location within a region. Okay, and inside the availability zone is where we have our data centers. So this is how the AWS global infrastructure is organized. So this organization is scattered all over the world. As you can see the map, if we go to the London region, then you will have three availability zones in the London region, and inside those availability zones are the data centers in that region. Okay, so in US we have many regions where AWS operates from, and not only US but all over the world. So this is the way it's organized. And as we said, we have edge locations, point of presence, and we have local zones, which we are going to have a dedicated lesson for those. All right. So let's have a look at the region and its characteristics. So AWS's region is interconnected through AWS's global network backbone. Okay, so all these data centers are interconnected worldwide. So we have huge fiber optic cable that goes under the seas and so on. So this is how huge AWS is. And as we can see here, we have the North Virginia is even located connected to the London region and all in every other region as well. Okay, so it's a separate geographical location. So we have the North Virginia. This is a separate geographic location. We have London and we have Stockholm and many. All right. It's interconnected globally with a network backbone, and it helps us comply with a certain legal or regulatory requirements of that geographic area. Okay, so North Virginia might have its own regulations and rules about data, how data should be handled. You might have some compliances that you have to follow, maybe data residency. Maybe if you are a bank or an insurance company or a medical company, you might have a regulation that that information should not leave the North Virginia region. So by deploying your application inside the North Virginia, it means that you are being compliant with those regulations. So you don't have to worry about independently complying as you would do if you had your own data center. All right. And there is a low latency access to users in a specific region. Okay, we'll have a look at this in much details, but if you have customer in, say, in maybe in London or Ireland, you want to deploy your applications close to your customers. Okay, so we get a low latency access within a specific region as well. Okay, and data is never replicated, or AWS never replicates data from one region to another region unless you specifically do so. So I might have two workloads running, maybe one in North Virginia and one in London. AWS will never replicate the data unless I replicate the data by myself, because there might be a regulatory compliance that I might have to follow. Okay, and contains multiple availability zones. So we said inside this region is where we have these availability zones. All right. So let's have a look at the availability zone. Now we are taking this example of EU West 2. This would be the London region. Okay. EU West 2 is the London region, and we have three availability zones. EU West 2A, this is how they are named, 2C, and EU West 2B. Okay, so these are our three availability zones, which are interconnected with a low latency private link. Okay, so it's a distinct location or discrete location within a region. Okay, and an availability zone contains one or more data center inside. Okay, so availability zones are interconnected with high-speed, low-latency network and isolated from disaster, fully isolated infrastructure, which means that if a failure occurs in availability zone EU West 2A, if some failure occurs, although they are connected, it does not affect the data, the availability zones that are connected with it, either 2B or 2C. So your application will remain functional if you have deployed it in multiple availability zones. Okay, and is designed for high availability and fault tolerance. Okay, now let's elaborate this a little bit more in a drawing. Okay, so you have a region here. Call it this is the London region. Okay, this is our London region, and inside this London region, we have availability zones. Okay, so this might be an availability zone 1, availability zone 2, and availability zone 3. These availability zones, they are interconnected with a high-speed private link. Okay, so availability zone, as its name indicates, it provides us with high availability that is known as HA. Okay, so if you're deploying an application, you just don't want to deploy it in one availability zone or in one data center. Okay, so you have a certain application here that you are running, could be web application. So instead of having only one application, you deploy the same application in different availability zones as a backup. So this can be an active or active passive connection. Okay. So if some failure happens in availability zone 1, let's call this 1 and let's call this 2 and call this 3. So you will keep up and running because the traffic is going to be redirected to the one that is working. Okay, because disaster, whatever happens in availability zone 1 does not affect the rest of the availability zones. Okay, so an availability zone provides us with high availability. Okay, that's fantastic. All right. So region. Now, whenever we want to deploy our application, we need to select a certain region. Okay, do we deploy it in North Virginia? Do we deploy it in London region? Do we deploy it in Paris or South Africa? What are the factors that determines us to choose a region? Okay, so one is compliance, as we discussed earlier. You might have some regulatory compliances that you must follow. Maybe it's about the data residency. So depending on the compliance, you could be obliged to choose a certain region based on if you have a requirement for regulatory requirement or compliances. The other is latency. You want to deploy your application close to your users, of course, because you want them to have an improved latency, better performance, and great experience. All right. The other is cost. For AWS services, cost is not the same. Okay, so for the same service in North Virginia might not be the same price as for that service maybe in London or maybe in South Africa or maybe in South America as well. So this is because of several factors. It depends on that region's, that country's costs as well. You know, the taxation cost, the grid cost, the raw materials cost. So that cost is passed to the customer, and that's why there are different prices for the same services in different regions in AWS. Okay, so if cost is your first priority, then you're going to have to select the one that is most cost effective for you. Okay, the other one is service availability. Okay, not all AWS services are available in all regions. In some regions, there might be some services available that are not available in different regions. So the technology that you want, the service that you want, you have to make sure that it's available on the region that you are looking for. Okay, so these are the factors that will determine us to choose a region. All right. So before we talk about the point of presence, let's have a look at the AWS console and see what we can have about that region. Okay. So this is the AWS console. Now I'm in the London region. How do I know that I'm in the London region? Because I can see it over here. So if I want to deploy an application maybe in North Virginia, then I'm going to have to click this drop down and choose the region. So if I click here, it will take me to North Virginia region immediately. All right. Then I can deploy my application on the region that I want. I can deploy my servers, I can get my networking, my database, and everything in North Virginia. And if I want in Singapore, I can select Singapore as well, or South Africa as well. Okay. So this is how it works, and we have all these regions that we can see over here that we can choose from. All right. So that is the AWS's global infrastructure. And on the next topic, we are going to have a look at the more specific types, the edge location or point of presence, and the AWS local zones. See you in a bit.